Bears, Giants, Cowboys. We'll see. I think Packers hosting Miami's fascinating. Get to that in a bit. Jimmy Johnson this hour, too. The NFL does a great job. There is an illusion of parity. But because over the last decade, there's been all these rule changes, which have all benefited offense, the league has become very quarterback dependent. So if you have a top 10 quarterback, unless your coach is clueless, you're going to be a playoff team. So if you go to look at the AFC, for example, and you're going to see a lot of teams that have really, really good quarterbacks. Mahomes, what do you know? Josh Allen, C.J. Stroud, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert. And then you've got a couple of guys in right now, Bo Nix, but he's got Super Bowl winning coach Sean Payton. And there's Russell Wilson. Well, he's won a Super Bowl, and so has Mike Tomlin. So you can see very clearly, you got to have the coach or the quarterback or preferably both. If you go over to the NFC right now, outside of Seattle and Geno Smith, so Geno's not a star quarterback, and the head coach we don't know about, but Detroit, okay, you got a Super Bowl quarterback, Jared Goff. Jalen Hurts, you got a Super Bowl quarterback. Atlanta, weakest division in football, but Kirk Cousins has been, a top 10 quarterback now for a long time. In Minnesota, Green Bay, and Washington. Now, the NFC is the weaker, but be honest about this. Sam Darnold and Kevin O'Connell. Kevin O'Connell looks like a top 5 offensive coach in this league. He may be a top 5 coach. Green Bay, Matt LaFleur, shock. Jordan Love, I think an elite quarterback. And then Dan Quinn's been to a Super Bowl as Washington's coach. So you start looking around. Now, I don't think Seattle's going to win this division. I think either Matt Stafford or Kyler Murray are going to figure out a way to win this division, and that would be the elite quarterback category. So now here's the great thing about the NFL. You can go from very bad to very good instantly. It's the league of hope. Jim Harbaugh, Chargers, totally changed the franchise. C.J. Stroud, D'Amico Ryans changed the franchise. So the great thing about the NFL is the league of hope. It's not like baseball or the NBA or hockey that it takes draft pick after draft pick after draft pick, and you have to change the entire roster. I mean, the Chargers basically brought in better coaches. Boom, they're good. They're not great, they're good. And so, and what's funny, though, there's an illusion of parity. And I do think week to week, anybody can beat anybody. But my Super Bowl bubble, which I do about 4 times a year, is very familiar. Inside the bubble, Josh Allen and the Bills, Mahomes and the Chiefs, Lamar and John Harbaugh Ravens, Philadelphia, great franchise, and I think we all think Detroit is loaded. I do think Pittsburgh, Green Bay, the Chargers, and Minnesota are just on the periphery, all capable of making the playoffs and winning playoff games. But I think there's 5 teams, Super Bowl level quarterbacks that have been to Super Bowl, that can hoist a trophy.
Okay. Colin's infamous Super Bowl bubble. Obviously, there's a lot of, obvious teams in there, right? The Kansas City Chiefs, the Lions, the Eagles. The Eagles were in the Super Bowl in 22. The Chiefs obviously have won back-to-back Super Bowls. Ravens were just in the AFC Championship last year. So were the Detroit Lions were in the NFC Championship. And, the Bills are perennial, threats. And that's why, I don't even want to focus too much on them, on those teams in the bubble. Because it's obvious, right? Obviously, the Kansas City Chiefs can win a Super Bowl. The Eagles, the Lions, Lamar Jackson, the Ravens, and Josh Allen, and the Buffalo Bills. That is, if you find that controversial, again, I keep saying lately, is I don't really know what to say to you, right? I don't know what argument you need to hear. Because I really think if any of those teams in the bubble won the Super Bowl, I would say, yeah, makes total sense. Makes 100% sense. I can see it. Now, of course, there's different variations of who I think would more likely win the Super Bowl, or who maybe should, based off of how they're playing and their team construction, whatever it may be. But I think what's also really kind of interesting to me is the Steelers, the Packers, the Chargers, the Vikings. Because if the Vikings were able to win a Super Bowl, or the Steelers, or the Packers, or the Chargers, it would be one of the most remarkable things. It really would. On one side, I'm on the fence to see what I think would be the most interesting. or the best for just the NFL as a whole? On one side, having the Kansas City Chiefs three-peat would be obviously a huge talking point. Having a team like the Eagles or the Lions win a Super Bowl, massive, massive, massive fan bases, passionate fan bases. When teams like that win, it's obviously going to be great for the NFL. Someone like Lamar Jackson winning a Super Bowl, it's going to end same thing with Josh Allen. It starts to now, people are going to start to have those conversations. Did Josh Allen surpass Patrick Mahomes? Lamar Jackson surpass Patrick Mahomes? And those conversations are just great, big, intense, heated debates, all of that type of stuff. So that's all good. Now on the outside looking in, right, if the Minnesota Vikings, the Steelers, any of those teams win a Super Bowl, you're not necessarily going to have that same level of conversation. No one's going to be like, is Sam Darnold better than Patrick Mahomes, right? No one's going to say that. But it's going to be, people are going to have those conversations of like, what does it take to win a Super Bowl? People would be like, that's remarkable, Mike Tomlin. I think if Mike Tomlin won a Super Bowl with Russ, people would start to say like, is he one of the greatest coaches of all time? I think those will have those conversations, but it seems like fans aren't as interested in those types of conversations compared to saying, who's better. I think people would rather debate who's better, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, or than Mike Tomlin and Sean McVay or something. Like, people just seem to be a little bit less interested in that. I think if the Green Bay Packers end up winning the Super Bowl, having Jordan Love, especially considering, would depend on how great he plays in this made-up Super Bowl run, then people would start to say, hey, is this just the first of many? Can Jordan Love surpass Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady? I think anytime you have a new, younger quarterback or a quarterback that's seen as top wins their first Super Bowl, then people start to have those conversations of what's possible, how great are they, what do they need to be in? And again, Patrick Mahomes right now is the placeholder because obviously he's, the top quarterback in the NFL. That's kind of just like, I think that'll always be kind of the frame of reference. Just like how people keep saying, how can Patrick Mahomes pass Tom Brady? When you have these other quarterbacks, it's how can these quarterbacks pass Patrick Mahomes? So, and those are always the most heated, most, engaged content out there. I think, if Justin Herbert and the Chargers win the Super Bowl, that would be absolutely undeniably remarkable. And that would be kind of this turbocharge between Herbert and Harbaugh, how quickly you can turn it around. It's just, I look to see, like, where's the interesting story. Sam Darnold, right? Failing in New York, failing in Carolina for the most part, and then goes to Minnesota Vikings and wins a Super Bowl. I mean, like, some of these storylines would just be insane. That's why it's like, I don't even know what I'm rooting for at this point, honestly. I think the Lions winning would be absolutely remarkable and amazing. I think the Eagles winning would be amazing. The Bills, the Ravens, the Chiefs, like, honestly, like, every single team, I can justify one of these teams winning and what it would do from just a conversation perspective. Because I was talking about this in the comment section before, where I was saying, it would be interesting if certain teams win versus not, just because of the conversations that we get to have now. Like, it really is going to be so interesting if Lamar Jackson wins a Super Bowl. He'll now have multiple MVPs, a Super Bowl, most likely a Super Bowl MVP, and then people will have more serious conversations about, is Lamar Jackson an all-time great? Is he better than Patrick Mahomes? Again, same thing on the flip side with Josh Allen. If Jared Goff and the Lions or the Philadelphia Eagles win, like, you're not going to necessarily have that conversation about Jared Goff or even Jalen Hurts. Right or wrong, it's just it's not where I think the conversation will be had. But again, Saquon Barkley wins the Eagles win the Super Bowl and Saquon Barkley is the Super Bowl MVP. I mean, like, talk about it, a remarkable story. The Giants giving up Saquon, famously on Hard Knocks saying, why should we pay for this running back? And he now leads the Eagles to a Super Bowl. I mean, like, that storyline would be it would be one of the greatest storylines ever written in the NFL. So, like, that's what I kind of look for, honestly. The Green Bay Packers move on from Aaron Rodgers, get Jordan Love. Aaron Rodgers goes to New York, can't even win 5 games. The Green Bay Packers win a Super Bowl, and Jordan Love is the Super Bowl MVP. I mean, those storylines are box office. And that's why I'm taking this conversation in that direction rather than being like, can the Kansas City Chiefs win a Super Bowl? We've already had that conversation so many times. We've already had it so many times. Like, how many times can the Detroit Lions really make a Super Bowl run? Yes. The answer is yes. Okay. Like, we don't have to unpack it much more than that, quite frankly. So I'm just kind of looking at it through this lens of, like, what's the most interesting? And obviously, I know if you're a Lions fan, you want the Lions. If you're a Packers fan, you want the Packers. Like, I get that, obviously. But I just think, like, what's the most interesting? What's the juiciest? What's the one that's going to cause more controversy, more heated discussions, make you think what it takes to win a Super Bowl? That's why I think if say the Minnesota Vikings or even the Steelers win, or the Chargers for that matter, you'll think, like, what do you need from a roster construction, a level of coaching, like a level of quarterback play, because we know this is a copycat league. So if, let's say, the Steelers do win, or the Chargers or the Minnesota Vikings win, especially more the Minnesota Vikings than ever, I think if the Minnesota Vikings end up winning a Super Bowl, it will rock people's world of how they evaluate quarterback play. And I think you'll get so many more second, third, fourth chances on quarterbacks than we've ever seen. It's like a Daniel Jones. Obviously, we just saw Minnesota Vikings take Daniel Jones, but you'll see more of those opportunities, way more, and more other coaches will start to believe, I can make that quarterback better. Give me that quarterback, and I got it. Let's go. And I think that's where things could be really interesting. So just kind of similarly that we saw with previous teams and the way how their roster was constructed, getting a young quarterback on a rookie deal or whatever, having a stacked roster going from there, or kind of the opposite, having an all-time great quarterback, maybe being a little bit limited from a roster construction, but having great coaching, having a great defense, boom, Super Bowl. So it's just every time we think we have the NFL figured out and what the path to success is, something kind of usually disrupts that. It's been pretty consistent lately, but it doesn't mean it's going to remain that way. Not at all. So it's just curious to be like, what, can something like this disrupt it? So yeah, I find so many of these various storylines honestly just fascinating. And I was thinking about this actually just the other day, like before I even saw this, which is kind of funny that this clip is the one that came up. But I really think to myself, like, at the heart of it, now that so many of these teams, because I always root for storylines. Sometimes I'll pick certain players and I'm like, you know what, I really want to see that player succeed or whatnot, whatever it may be, or teams or franchises or fan bases in general. I think to myself, like, now at this point, there's so many teams, especially since doing this channel, that I now know way more, I'm more intimately involved with and know and talk to their fans and all of this. They're starting to now play each other in a way where it's like, I don't know what I'm rooting for, right? Like, I don't know what I actually want to happen. Lamar, let's say the AFC Championship game is Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen. Like, those are two franchises, two quarterbacks that I genuinely want to see succeed. I want them both to have Super Bowls, MVPs. I want them both to be the king of the mountain. And I'm like, I don't know who I would be like, who I want to win in that, in that situation. Same thing with the Eagles versus the Lions, or even the Minnesota Vikings. Let's say the Minnesota Vikings find themselves in the in the NFC Championship game, and they're playing like the Detroit Lions or something. I'm like, oh my God, both of those franchises deserve it. Both those stories and those quarterbacks, it's wild. The coaching staff, like I would be like, I have no idea. I was like, I don't know. I felt that way with the Packers versus the 49ers and the 49ers versus the Lions. I'm like, man, this Lions story is remarkable, but also like Jordan Love and the Packers and Brock Purdy and the 49ers. Like, it's just, it's when you're a more general fan as I am, like, it's like, I will find myself so much more conflicted of like, I don't even know what I'm rooting for. And now that I have the extra layer of, creating content and having these conversations, I'm like, well, now I don't know, like, what is the better conversation? Like, what's the better story that I get to now make content around and have these in-depth conversations? And that's why some of these teams can be, like, less interesting, right? Like, the New England Patriots winning year after year after year. It's kind of like, yeah, I get it. Tom Brady's amazing. Patriots are amazing. Like, how, it's like you can only talk about that so much. That's why, again, I skipped this bubble to really, like, unpack. Let's talk about this. Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen, can they beat the Kansas City Chiefs in the? It's just like we've had that conversation 10,000 times. I can't do it anymore right now. Well, I'll be forced to do it in a few weeks because that's just the way it's going to go. But it's like Thanksgiving week, I'm not doing it right now. Let's just have a little bit more of an interesting, more like meta, top down, overlooking conversation. So I'm curious what you guys all think. Obviously, legit fans of these fan bases, but then also someone who maybe identifies with a little bit more with what I'm saying in terms of just like, you're just looking for interesting things to happen, entertainment, whatever it may be. No true dog in the, in the ring I'd love to hear your thoughts. You know, what do you think about this Super Bowl bubble in general? The teams. Do you think anyone should be in it? Anyone should be out it? You know, if you are more general fan, you know, casual. What do you think? You know, what do you think would be the most interesting storyline? Who do you think is the most deserving of it? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment. So whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community here, and I absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much, and see you next time.